Imagine a small city surrounded by enemies marked by internal crises, governed by ordinary citizens, and which in less than 4 centuries would become the greatest power in the ancient world. A city that invented unprecedented political systems, faced impossible wars, challenged empires, destroyed giant enemies, dealt with corruption, inequality, coups, tyranny, and in the end, fell by the same hands that built it. This is the story of the Roman Republic, and today you will understand how it was born, how it grew, how it dominated the Mediterranean, and why in the end, it collapsed so dramatically that it still serves as a warning to any society today. The fall of the kings and the birth of the Republic, 509 BC. According to Roman tradition, it all began with an abuse of power. Rome was ruled by kings, but the last of them, Tarquinius Superbus, became a tyrant. The final straw came when his son committed a terrible crime against Lucretia, a Roman noblewoman. This act shocked all of society. The result? A revolt. The Romans expelled the monarchy and swore never again to allow a single man to have absolute power. Thus was born the Roman Republic. But what was this republic? It was not a democracy. It was a delicate balance between consuls, 2 leaders elected annually to prevent one from becoming king. Senate, formed by aristocrats controlling long-term decisions. Popular assemblies, where the people voted on laws and elected magistrates. Tribunes of the plebs, representatives of the people with veto power. And they were sacred, untouchable. Rome from the beginning was built on the idea of limiting power, creating a complex political machine to prevent abuses. But this system did not prevent conflicts. In fact, it ended up provoking several. Saquaturin, the struggle between patricians and plebeians. Initially, all power was in the hands of the patricians, the noble families. The plebeians, workers, soldiers, farmers, grew tired of this, and they began to exert pressure. The crisis became so severe that the plebeians did something unprecedented. They thus abandoned the city. They simply left Rome and said, "Without our work, without our soldiers, Rome dies." It was a monumental coup, and it worked. Rome yielded. The plebeians gained rights, including their own political representatives, written laws, gradual legal equality, and the right to marry patricians. The city that would grow to rule the world began by governing its own internal conflicts. And with this social base, Rome was ready to fight for something bigger. The expansion in Italy. The world watches Rome grow. Rome was a small city amid strong peoples, Etruscans to the north, Samnites to the south, Greeks scattered along the coast. A common mistake is to imagine that Rome was always a superpower. It wasn't. It became one. The wars against the Samnites, for example, lasted decades and almost destroyed Rome. But each defeat taught something. Rome learned, reorganized its army, returned to the battlefield, and won. The characteristic that began to define Rome was simple and frightening. Rome never accepted defeat. When it finally dominated the Italian peninsula, something important happened. Rome did not destroy its enemies. It offered alliances, partial citizenship, military pacts. In other words, it united the defeated to its system, and this would become its greatest strength, and later its greatest problem. But before that, Rome would have to face its greatest challenge yet: Carthage. The Punic Wars. Rome against Carthage. If history were a movie, this would be the epic moment. Rome dominated Italy. Carthage dominated maritime trade and much of the Western Mediterranean. The two powers would inevitably clash, and so began the Punic Wars. 3 conflicts that lasted more than a century. The Second Punic War, Hannibal's War. The central figure of this conflict needs no introduction. Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who led elephants across the Alps. His plan? To destroy Rome on its own territory. And he almost succeeded. In battles like Cannae, he annihilated entire Roman armies. It was one of the greatest military defeats in all of history. But Rome had something Hannibal didn't: virtually infinite human resources, and the determination never to surrender. Over time, Rome reorganized its forces, counterattacked in Africa itself, and, under the command of Scipio Africanus, defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama. Carthage was humiliated, and Rome emerged as the new superpower of the Mediterranean. But success would begin to corrode the Republic from within: wealth, inequality, and the beginning of the end. With the victory over Carthage and other conquests, Rome became too rich, too fast. Vast lands were taken, slaves arrived in enormous numbers, and the elite began to accumulate wealth, while the common citizen lost ground. The result? The plebeians suffered again and demanded reforms. This is where figures like the Gracchi brothers come in, tribunes of the plebeians who tried to redistribute land and combat inequalities. Tiberius Gracchus was killed, then Gaius Gracchus too. Political violence, something previously rare, became common. The Republic began to crack. Marius, Sulla, and the Civil Wars. With the army becoming increasingly professional and dependent on charismatic generals, Rome entered a dangerous era. Gaius Marius, a famous general, carried out profound reforms and gave more power to poor soldiers. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, another ambitious general, entered into political conflict with Marius. What began as an electoral dispute turned into civil war. Sulla marched on Rome, something unthinkable until then, and seized power as dictator. He tried to restore order, but the example had been set. Now, any general with the support of the troops could overthrow the government. The Republic would never be the same again. The stars emerge: Crassus, Pompey, nay, Julius Caesar. After the chaos, three men became the most powerful in Rome. Crassus, the richest man in the city. Pompey, the greatest general of the time. Julius Caesar, a brilliant, ambitious, and extremely popular politician. They formed the so-called First Triumvirate, an informal alliance to dominate the Republic. But alliances based on ambition have an expiration date. When Crassus died and Pompey approached the Senate, Caesar became a threat. The order was clear: Caesar should return to Rome alone, without his army. He knew he would be arrested, and he made the decision that would change the world. He crossed the Rubicon. With his troops, in a legal and irreversible act, it was yet another civil war. Caesar defeated Pompey, took control of the Republic, and initiated profound reforms. He was capable, popular, and too powerful, and that scared many senators. The assassination that did not save the Republic. On March 15, 44 BC, a group of senators, including Brutus and Cassius, assassinated Julius Caesar, believing they were saving the Republic. But they made a fatal mistake. They killed the man, but not the system that had created him. The power vacuum led Rome to chaos again, and from the ashes arose Caesar's young heir, Octavian. The final act: Octavian, Mark Antony, and the end of the Republic. Octavian and Mark Antony, temporary allies, formed the Second Triumvirate. They pursued Caesar's assassins. Then they broke apart. The final conflict was inevitable. The Battle of Actium decided everything. Mark Antony and Cleopatra were defeated. Rome belonged to Octavian, but unlike Caesar, Octavian was more cautious. He did not declare himself king. He did not provoke the Senate. He became Augustus, the first citizen, creating a regime that seemed republican, but was not. With Augustus, the Roman Empire was born, and so after almost 500 years, the Republic came to an end. Conclusion: the legacy and the lesson. The Roman Republic did not die overnight. It was slowly eroded by growing social inequality, concentration of power, corruption, generals more loyal to their own legions than to the state, and political elites who preferred defeating rivals to saving the system. In the end, Rome became a victim of its own success, but its legacy continues. The concept of a republic, Roman law, citizenship, the balance of power, institutions that influence modern democracies. When we study the Roman Republic, we are not just looking at the past. We are seeing a mirror, a warning of how societies grow, prosper, and can crumble when their institutions break down. If you've watched this far, congratulations. You've understood one of the most complex and important stories in human history. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe to the channel because there is still much in the past that can illuminate our future.